Hello and welcome. My name is Nick McCarthy. I'm the Director of Programming at NewFest, New York's leading LGBTQ film and media organization. You may know us best for our annual New York LGBTQ Film Festival. We've been around for over 30 years, and this year we'll be celebrating our 32nd festival. We are going to be virtual. We're really excited. It will be a big announcement tomorrow. We will be virtual, and our dates will be October 16th to the 27th. Passes are now on sale, so visit newfest.org and get your all-access virtual pass. We're presenting nearly 100 LGBTQ films across the full spectrum of our experience, and we are so excited to be able to share these premiere films with you then. So definitely mark your calendars for October 16th to the 27th and visit newfest.org and get your pass. Of course, this is a screening that we will be doing right now tonight with the Q&A as part of our ongoing series with our wonderful partners at the LGBT Community Center. This is NewFest at the Center Presents, and we are so delighted to have the virtual New York premiere of this gorgeous film from Isabel Sandoval, Lingua Franca. I know all of you probably watched it before, and we're so glad you can join us tonight. I do want to note that our next month's NewFest at the Center Presents will be a film called So Pretty, which is another gorgeous take on Brooklyn, focusing on 20-something genderqueer and trans individuals in the loves of their lives and how they communicate, and also what they celebrate within their own communities as well. I want to once again thank the center for all that they do to support so often marginalized communities, even within the LGBTQ community. I also want to thank Array Releasing, who will be releasing this film. Array is stood for social justice and through storytelling and film, and they will be presenting Lingua Franca on Netflix starting August 26th, just a week from today. So I know all of you probably love the film, so after you hear from the filmmaker, the producer, and one of the stars of it, please be sure to tell all of your friends about it, because it will be on Netflix and widely available starting on August 26th. Before we bring out our wonderful guests, I'd love to sink back into the beautiful, wonderful textures of Lingua Franca and present the trailer again.
Gihangol ko sa imong paghikap, kasi laob sa kalibutan.
It's good to see you, Baba.
It's good to see you, my darling.
You need help with that?
Okay. I'm sending this to my family back home.
If you want, I can drive you to the post office. If that's okay with your boyfriend.
He's not my boyfriend.
You're safe now. You're here with me.
You don't know what you're talking about. That man, I was paying him to marry me for a green card.
Gorgeous.
I want to tell you something.
It doesn't matter to me.
Gihangol ko sa imong paghikap, kalukog na ako sa dilaang.
It's my absolute pleasure to introduce everyone to actress Ivory Aquino, producer Carlo Velayo, and multi-hyphenate and marvelous talent, the director, writer, producer, editor, and star of Lingua Franca, Isabel Sandoval. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Nick.
everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
So to dive right in, because I know I'm sure we have a bunch of questions too, I want to, of course, congratulate you again on this film. It is both, feels, like it may be a simple story of an everyday person in New York City, but, the layers that you're able to uncover through all of what you contribute to the film. Isabel, of course, I'd love to start with you. Can you speak a little bit about how you found Olivia? Being sort of someone who's wearing 5 hats in this film too. What was the process sort of for you to uncover who she is and how she navigates the world, and how the world sort of revolves around her as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, it's my third feature, but it's my first after my gender transition. And, I don't really talk about this a lot, but, like, I feel like if I had stayed in the Philippines, I would never have realized I was transgender. And I think because growing up there, in terms of how trans women are portrayed in the media, it's always kind of an image that's very hyper feminized, and they're very glamorous, like entering beauty queen pageants. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that was also not, the kind of woman that I identified with. I was more bookish and very reserved. And so it was only until, coming to the US and I saw, on YouTube, trans people from different backgrounds, like some are writers, some are working in marketing, that were chronicling their transition online. And I realized I was asking the same questions that they were asking. And so that made me realize I was trans. And, I realized that, my transition is not about becoming a woman, but becoming more fully myself. And in Olivia, I wanted to portray the kind of trans woman that I would want to see more, in media, and especially, in depictions in Philippine film and TV, the kind that's not always looking to be, hot and sexy and,
Which you
the
are.
most glamorous. Exactly. And I want to flesh her out and make her feel, three-dimensional. And this is what I imagine a trans woman who happens to be Filipino and a caregiver and immigrant would be. I want her to feel sensual, and to experience her sensuality, but I also want her to be flawed and, angry and sad and, affectionate and all of those things.
Yeah, and you capture all of this so well. There's a certain lyricism and texture to the film, as I've mentioned too. Isabel and perhaps Carlo as well. You can speak to, I know this is done on a tight budget too, but you make it look so, luscious and expensive too. I was wondering if you can speak to maybe how you fundraised for this, trans Filipino immigrant story, as well as sort of how you executed it in a very resourceful way to make it seem, as beautiful as it does.
Well, as you mentioned, Nick, this is a labor of love, and we are very grateful that we're able to share it here through NewFest and LGBT Center. So thank you so much for helping us spread the word. That's exactly what it has been like for the last 3 years. There was a Kickstarter campaign that was launched at the beginning of 2018. So that was really the first time that the team raised funds, but then it was a matter of going out to private equity investors and staying true to the story. So not changing the script to meet the needs or the expectations of certain investors, but finding the right investors who believed in the story and wanted to support the film. And then it goes back to the incredible cast and crew who read the script and who really believed in the story that Isabel had penned, and talking to her what she wanted to see on screen, and the cast and crew coming together with very little funds, but being very resourceful, being very creative, and really being team players to get the film made.
Yeah. I mean, Isabel, do you want to speak to kind of the production too, sort of wearing 5 hats and how management of that, we knew a little bit, so I know that, you so many zones of, wonderful ideas. I was just curious sort of how you feel like that balance, contributed to,
people tend to talk about that. I was like, wow, I mean, you took on all these multiple, responsibilities, but I don't necessarily think of them as separate, are distinct from each other. I mean, I had one job, which is make a film and tell a story, and that has, multiple facets to it. Like the script is one, direction is one, performance. And when you're a writer director, usually the main protagonist of your script is kind of your alter ego or a double. And so, the roles that I took on were kind of, I think, the key creative roles in the film to make sure that I really was able to translate my vision from the page to the screen faithfully and without compromise. And also, I consider it such a privilege for me to be able to do these things because I love filmmaking. It's been my passion since I was young, and not everyone is given this opportunity. I'm the first person. I know it sounds like really corny, but I'm the first person to wake up, when I have a shoot, and the last person to go to bed. So I'm just grateful that I get to do these things and with these amazing people, Carlo and Ivory.
No, absolutely. And I want to speak, actually, Ivory. I first saw you in When We Rise, the limited series.
Really? Yay, thanks, Nick.
Yeah. I really love the scene that you and Isabel have in the church. I was wondering, it's also sort of one of the first times we really get into sort of like a conversation in Tagalog. And I was wondering if you two can speak to both shooting that scene. Also, it has such a natural, organic chemistry and dynamic. Was it something on the page, or did you allow yourself to sort of be open? Or did Isabel allow you to be open?
Yeah, first of all, I love your nails. I just got a glimpse of them. Fabulous. And yes, thanks everyone for joining us. I dimmed the lights so I could feel like I'm in a movie theater. And also in honor of the mysterious tone of lingua franca. But yes, I actually love speaking Filipino, speaking Tagalog. In fact, when I Zoom with my family back home, I only speak Tagalog and Filipino with my nieces and my nephew. And they're like, don't you live in New York? I'm like, yes, but I can't speak Tagalog in New York, so I'm speaking Tagalog with you. So when I got to have these scenes with Isabel, in these scenes between Olivia, Isabel's character, and Trixie, my character, I was in acting heaven. I was just so in. I feel your first language is very much a part of you. Not to say that English is not a part of me, but there's something very instinctive and very elemental to it that when we were doing the scenes, it almost brought me back to my childhood in the Philippines. And what I love, in addition to being able to have spoken Filipino in these scenes, is that Isabel and the whole team, Carlo included, Darlene and Jet, our other producers, it's a very collaborative environment. So it really was a haven where I felt that I could just focus on the work, which was telling the story of Trixie, my character, and the friendship between Trixie and Olivia. So I just was very at home. We shot this in Brooklyn, but I very much felt like I was in the Philippines, in these hallways. I remember just speaking Tagalog when I was in high school and all that. And we even have a throwback in one of the scenes, which Isabel specially wrote, where we reminisced of us being students and hearkening back to that backstory. So yes, I was a very, very happy camper doing these many of these scenes in Tagalog and or Filipino, as we officially call it now.
Yeah, in that scene, like I said, it sort of like breathes so much life too. Isabel on set with like sort of being both, actor and director with like, Ivory dealing with the cast. How did you feel sort of like after the take? Were you like, okay, that was great? Or like sort of what's your process of both being sort of in front of you?
Was it for me or
Ivory? Yeah. As a director too. Like I find it such an organic chemistry that like you're able to sort of do that. I was just curious about process too and how you work with your actors.
Yeah, and also like with Ivory, like we are actually friends in real life, so it's really that also came through. And I really love doing that scene also because it's really quite rare. Not only between two trans women that are not always, I mean, even though they talk about men in this instance, it's kind of transactional. It's very Jane Austen in some sense. And I wanted to show these two women kind of being spiritual, like in a church. And I think there is something quietly radical about that, portraying two Filipino trans women, you know, talking to each other about, spirituality within a film set in America that's populated by other American characters. And the film opens and closes with montages of, scenes in Brighton Beach, Coney Island, but the language is, Filipino. So.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to New York City too. I mean, your film feels so directly connected to that. I was wondering, both Isabel and Carlo as well, if you can speak to sort of the shooting locations and where you chose. I know it's a Brighton Beach tale, and it takes place within a Russian family as well. So I was just wondering what the location scouting was like, and covering New York City in that way too.
Yeah, that is quite an experience because as an independent film, sometimes it can be very, very challenging, to say the least, to look for locations. And as a matter of fact, some of the key locations that we ended up shooting at in the film, we got either a few days before. And like, for example, the slaughterhouse, we got that location, we confirmed that location literally the day before we shot there. The day before. So yeah, but these are the locations were all either in Brooklyn or in New Jersey. Like, for example, the slaughterhouse was in New Jersey. One of the boardwalk scenes where they're walking together was in Asbury Park, but the rest of it is really Brighton Beach. And for Olga's apartment, it's somewhere in Bed-Stuy, actually. Yeah, but so it's we secure the locations in a very independent film kind of way.
I guess I'll add to that, Nick, by saying the locations also just prove how committed Isabel is to this project. So we shot in 16 days for principal photography, but then we also had 2 pickup shoot days in January of 2019. And that's actually when Isabel added the scenes with Ivory and Isabel in the church where Ivory or Trixie sings, which is just a beautiful addition to the script. But in terms of shooting on the Coney Island boardwalk, that was actually done in January of 2019. So you can imagine, it's the height of winter, and we were trying to fake summer during winter. And one day it just started snowing, and we embraced it. And so we got some of the shots with snow on the boardwalk, which look incredible and adds to the texture that you mentioned. But the following day, Isabel still had to be in her summer dress with a denim jacket sitting on the bench where the day before it was snowing, pretending that it was summer. So it just goes to show that, she had a vision and she was so committed to getting that one shot that adds so much to the narrative.
Yeah, no, really lightens up the film too. I feel like you just really are possessive of like the locations that you shoot into, capturing the sort of sense of Brooklyn. Going back to kind of talking about like editing and reshoots too, Isabel, I know you're the editor as well. It's quite a process too for sort of coming out to like to edit your film and then be like, oh, I wish this was slightly changed. Did you resist any kind of reshoots, or how did that happen sort of when you were in the editing room? Like, oh, I could have made this, I know this film is so beautiful, like it's perfectionist kind of, like, how did you reconcile that?
Yeah, and it was kind of tricky at first, especially with some of the other, producers. And it was really my first time working with them. And typically, directors do not edit their own work. But I can say that, to my credit, I can actually be impartial and objective about my own work. And, when I conceive of my films, I conceive of them as cut, edited, scenes and sequences. And, I had 5 roles in this film. And if there's actually one that I would never give up, it's probably as an editor, because I think that's where the film really comes together, in the editing room. And all of, what other key creatives do is really just providing the editor the raw material to work with, to cut and snip and string together. So, and I did get into an argument with the GP, Isaac Times, who, did an amazing job in Lingua Franca, because we shot a whole, subplot, for instance, with Lynn Cohen's character, Olga, that alluded to, her past as an immigrant, as a Ukrainian immigrant who moved here to the US back in the 60s, 70s, to leave a home country that was dealing with the aftermath of the Holocaust. When I saw the footage that we got for those scenes, I ultimately thought that they didn't work. So I cut them out, but some of those scenes were very beautifully and exquisitely shot. And I was telling Isaac, listen, at the end of the day, they look beautiful, but it's not going to work in my movie. So it's kind of like, in a way, I enjoy it so much because I can say, like, as Isabel, the editor, I can tell Isabel, the director, sorry, this is not going to... And this kind of Cybele, multiple personality kind of thing. That's how it was.
No, yeah, I mean, your artistic impulses, I feel like, are, so on point too. We're going to go to the audience questions in a moment or two. But first, I kind of want to ask you too. I know that the film has traveled the festival circuit after world premiering at Venice last year and then going to the London Film Festival. You've screened at numerous international film festivals and won awards at a bunch of them too. I know just recently you went to Bill, you won the Grand Drink Prize, and you got a special mention at AGLIF in Austin. Isabel, and I guess everyone too, in case you've been to these screenings, is there any person that came up to you afterwards after seeing the film and shared a story with you that your film was able to give them access to, that they really wanted to share, that resonated with them? I guess, Isabel, I see you as such like a wonderful sort of role model too. So I just was curious if there was anything along the circuit that people came up to you afterwards.
Sure. Ivy, do you want to go first? Do you remember at BFI London? Yeah.
Yes, I do. So
yeah.
I just the question is just any reactions to the film afterwards. Wow. Yeah. Isabel was alluding to an instance, and what I really gathered from that is someone had asked gosh, you know what? Yeah, we were about a year ago. We were about to embark on this tour, so I may be mixing up some cities. But the important thing is, at the end of the screening, someone who had asked a question very bravely, as they had the mic, had relayed that they feel that they are trans, and this was before they transitioned. And I found that to be so brave and so amazing and so inspiring. And then afterwards, they came up to us and said, thank you so much, because, in essence, the film has given them courage to be able to really honor who they are and be proud of that. And actually, those were the moments where I teared up, because, I know there were moments in the film that were very touching, and like, I was very moved. What added to that is these moments of people just coming up to us and saying how much they were moved and how much it has meant to their lives. And I think that's the beauty of art. You have no idea how when it's out in the world, how it's gonna just touch someone and really impact their lives. And we were able to see that firsthand. People just responding on a very personal level and letting us know that it has given them courage, especially because they have been able to see representation of their story on the big screen, on screen. And I think that's very important. And I'm very thankful to Isabel and Carlo for bringing that out into the world.
Yeah, representation matters. Thank you for sharing that. I think we're actually gonna go to a few audience questions too.
Okay, great.
From Jara. Such a beautiful film. Congrats all. Isabel, you have such a strong eye and clear vision. So I'd love to know if there are any filmmakers or films that inspire you in particular.
Thank you, Jara. Yes, actually, James Gray is a major influence. His last film is Ad Astra with Brad Pitt, but early on in his career, and he's originally from Queens, but he's Russian Jewish, and so he set a few of his films in Brighton Beach, actually, like Two Lovers, starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Joaquin Phoenix, is set in Brighton Beach. Little Odessa is set in that neighborhood, and other filmmakers that have been an influence is Wong Kar-wai. And it's funny because I've loved his films like In the Mood for Love for a long time, but when I was making Lingua Franca, it was not even a conscious influence. But when I started showing a rough cut of the film to a few friends, like more than two of them like mentioned In the Mood for Love as a reference. And then there's also Rainer Werner Fassbinder, the prolific queer German filmmaker from the 70s and early 80s. Specifically, Ali, Fear Eats the Soul, which is also an interracial love story between a German woman and an Algerian immigrant. So those are kind of the immediate influences on the film.
No, that's great. And they're all wonderful films too. So
Yes.
so rewatching Lingua Franca on Netflix, those are ones to check out as well. Another audience question. All right, Jim Kelly, no spoilers. But the scene shown in the trailer where Olivia is crying while being held by Alex really showcases her acting chops. What did you draw from to portray such raw emotion?
Hey, Jim. Jim's my friend. I'm so glad that. Hi, Jim and Dom. So that's the slow dancing, right? I think. I don't know. Is it like weird or disappointing to say that I can cry pretty easily?
Oh.
But yeah, it's or I think it's really just empathizing with Olivia. This is a character that I've kind of lived with for the good part of almost 2 years when I was writing her and finally inhabiting her while shooting the film. And accessing those emotions came naturally and organically because, I think I would not have been able to write someone like Olivia if I didn't see a part of me, if I wasn't writing a part of me in her. And so while her character is not an purely autobiographical character, there is some degree of psychological and emotional truth in her about myself. Yeah.
All right, next question. Liz Criolla asked, love the film. What was important for you? Why was it important for you to include the Trump voice footage?
Yeah, and also I wanted to add that I pointedly included just, audio of Trump talking, but not, images of him to set that tone and atmosphere. I feel like, the monster is scarier inside the closet, so to speak, before you see the monster. And I feel like in terms of sound and sound design, that's actually more effective in terms of evoking that particular, emotion and atmosphere in a film. But it was also very important for me to situate Olivia within a particular milieu, and that is Trump's America. This is a present day drama.
Yeah, it's very well executed. Another audience question. Ilana Mitra asks, I saw the film won a big prize in Bentonville Festival last week. Congrats. How does it feel to have the film be so well received and now available to such a wide audience on Netflix?
It's thrilling, absolutely. I mean, this is a big dream for us, as filmmakers, to have our film be seen by a broad, audience. And we're very lucky to have partnered with, Ava DuVernay and her distribution company Array, because, Ava's always championed and amplified the voices of underrepresented filmmakers, minority voices, like myself. But I'm also, even more appreciative of her because, now that we're promoting the film, she's encouraged me to also talk about, my unique sensibility and aesthetic as an auteur. I feel like a lot of times as minority filmmakers, when we're made to talk about our films, we're almost always, compelled to ceaselessly represent, our communities. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but, I feel like it can be a double-edged sword, because while we're representing our communities, especially when as an artist and a filmmaker trying to navigate, the entertainment business in Hollywood, it's just as easy for someone like myself to be pigeonholed and put in a box. Oh, you're a Filipino filmmaker, you're an immigrant filmmaker, you're a trans filmmaker. And so it's really striking that delicate balance in creating work and also finding opportunities to expand, to really be creative. Yeah. Sorry if I'm not rambling.
No, and I think that's a point that
Rambling Rose, honey. You're the Rambling Rose.
Person. I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So I think we have another question. Oh, Johnny Yu asks, thank you all for being here. This is such a great opportunity to hear from the makers of the film. I thought that Isabel left the ending relatively open. I was wondering what your interpretations are of the ending scene that echoes the beginning of the film.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. Some people find ending ambiguous or open. At least in my opinion, it's apparent that she turned down his offer and kind of moved on, as we can hear in her, recorded voice message to her mother. But, it's at that ending, that climactic moment where I feel I'm inviting the audience to really try to understand Olivia more than the labels that are, immediately slapped on her. Because, when she turns down her offer, it initially seems counterintuitive and also impractical. Like, this woman is one, a trans woman looking for love. Second, an undocumented immigrant who's looking for papers. Accepting the marriage offer would have been an easy way out, But it's at that point, by having her choose a different, unexpected decision, I'm asking the audience to, why do you think, she decided that way? And ultimately, it's about her gaining back her agency and her ability to determine her own life and her own future. Because accepting the marriage offer would mean, marrying someone who exploited her deepest vulnerabilities and betrayed her trust. And it also very subtly shows that she did care enough about him for his gaslighting to wound her that much emotionally. It's, Lingua Franca in certain ways, I feel is an unfashionable film because it talks about very contemporary and very pressing political issues like immigration and the transgender experience. But it's not filmmaking with a bullhorn. It's not filmmaking with a megaphone. The emotions that I deal with in the film are not easy or straightforward. They're complex, they're subtle, they're contradictory and sometimes elusive. And it's because I want my film and a film like in Lingua Franca to be an invitation to people to listen and pay attention, and to pay attention not just to the words but to the silences and the pauses in between, and to think deeply and critically about a woman like Olivia and the themes that the film touches on.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
Sula Harisayatis says, thank you for this film. I'd love to hear you speak more about how you created the story behind Alex and Olivia's relationship.
Yeah, so Alex is kind of, or I've been in a situation, an emotional situation like that, not with a slaughterhouse worker, although there's nothing wrong with that, or a Russian Jewish man, but kind of treading that, thin line, being, allowing myself to be, emotionally vulnerable and attached to someone who might, is not necessarily aware that I'm trans. So, there's that attraction, but also a sense of kind of anxiety or a little fear about my well-being and safety, and the fear of rejection as well. And, Lingua Franca, I think, is at its heart a drama about interiority. It's about interior and inward characters who might not necessarily have the courage or the emotional resources to, one, fully understand how they feel, and second, to deal with it maturely, and third, to articulate their feelings, especially in the case of Alex, for instance, who is very much a product of his environment. He was born and raised in Brighton Beach, in a Russian neighborhood, and that, can be misogynistic and homophobic and transphobic. And so, when he first learns about Olivia being trans, he's not able to process it in any mature way, and so he retaliates against her, and because he doesn't know any better. And so over the course of the film, Olivia was also, keeping that her secret out of a sense of shame. One, being, transgender and being afraid of rejection, and second, she's afraid of what people might do or how they might kind of exploit her status if they found out that she was undocumented. And so, yeah, the entire film is kind of portrays the arc of these two characters dealing with those issues internally, and also when it comes to the relationship and how they ultimately relate with each other.
We have to wrap up, but I want to thank you for essentially speaking volumes in quietness and using your voice and vision to create light into the story. We're really honored to be able to this film, and I want to congratulate you all again. And remind everyone, of course, that Array is doing a wonderful job getting this out into the world, and it will be on Netflix on August 26th. So 1 week from today, you will be able to see it again and tell all of your friends, and you can continue this conversation and maybe direct them back to this wonderful conversation. I want to thank Carlo, Ivory, and Isabel once again for being here tonight to celebrate your beautiful film.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
I also just want to thank Nick. Thank you so much, and to NewFest. You've been champions of Lingua Franca from the start, even well before its world premiere. So I'm really, really ecstatic and happy that we're able to bring this film to the NewFest audiences. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.